So kind of continuing that theme about mapping, I want to talk a little bit more about generalization, visualization, and really what I read this article yesterday talking about maps as just a model of reality, and I like that. And then Edward Tufte, who's one of the best-known visualists alive today, he has this quote that says, I like this, "Graphic excellence is that which gives to the viewer the greatest number of ideas in the shortest time with the least ink in the smallest space." So, so it's kind of like, don't add stuff you don't need, because you take away from your design. Another famous cartographer is Marc Monmonier, and he says, not only is it easy to lie with maps, it's essential, right? There's no escape from cartographic paradox. To present a useful and truthful picture, your map must tell white lies. So he distinguishes between propaganda, I think, and when do you have to generalize and lie in order to make an effective map. And so what I want to think about are kind of some of the map elements, and we did that looking at Aileen Buckley's article. And a lot of this is going to depend on what kind of media you're using. We've got such versatility now with online maps and scalability that the rules for paper maps have really changed kind of looking at the world in general. And so when you're designing a map, the things to consider when you look at maps is that the type of map. Is it reference or thematic? What was the function? What was the purpose? Is it online? Is it paper? And then, are you writing to a planning commission, a professional scientific presentation, community members in a forum? So all of that has a bearing on what you put on your map. So here's an example of a good lie according to Montmonier. So this is the London Tube. Anybody ever been to the London Tube? Yeah? Okay. I've never been to the London Tube. I've been to in DC, to their lines. And it looks a lot like this. And the lie here is, this is not to scale. Because the distance between these stops, to make it to scale, this map would have to be really, really long because some of these stops are so much further apart than others. So I don't know if it says on here that it's not to scale, because I think that would be important, because if I'm writing this, I'm expecting the time between here and here to be, half the time between here and here, and that may not be true. But he's saying it was essential to make a useful map to distort the spatial component here. Okay? So sometimes you have to lie. We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. Here's the Mercator projection, which is really a bad lie. This distorts the size of Russia, of China. And this was used deliberately by the John Birch Society to show what an evil, awful influence, that part of the country was going to be. And it actually shows Africa is about a little less than the size of North America, and really it's about 20% bigger.
And the size of Antarctica.
It's huge, right, and Greenland, yeah. So, but this is the map most kids grew up with in school. This was our vision of the world, right? And it's not a wrong projection, but it's a wrong projection for the use. Question?
Yeah, isn't the size of Africa really controversial because of how big it is compared to how it is shown on the map, on this map?
That's
Can you fit like Europe, America, United States, and like all these different continents inside of Africa?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the point. Is this is showing Africa is much smaller than it actually is. So this map does not preserve area, right? It actually distorts area. So this is a map that was used for unholy purposes. Anyway, okay. So we talked about all maps having to be a simplification of reality, right? You can't show everything on a map. So sometimes cartographers leave out features. And so one of the examples I looked at yesterday was mapping the coastline in California. And there are so many small little islands that if you mapped them all and made a map of California, it would be so cluttered and jammed that you really wouldn't be able to distinguish much because the islands are close. The line width that you'd have to show on a map would be bigger than the island itself. And so sometimes you leave those things out. And that's perfectly fine if you're making a thematic map, right? If you want to know, distribution of population or something, you probably aren't going to need those islands included in that. And maybe even a reference map. If you're making a survey map, no, you're going to want as accurate as you can in all areas. Another way is to kind of simplify coastlines, right? Again, that would depend on the kind of map and the scale of the final project. So here's a couple examples of maps of Kauai. And this map has a very simplified, generalized outline, right? And this map has much more detail. So the map in the lower right-hand corner was intended to show features along the coast. It zoomed in on just that island. And the map up in the I was going to say northwest, but that's probably not good for this. In the upper left-hand corner is kind of showing very general types of geology. And so the shape of the island is not all that critical to this. And so that was a deliberate decision somebody made to simplify lines. Hold on. So sometimes detailed lines can be distracting. So here's a map. I kind of Googled Salem, Oregon, and one of the things that I noticed is that little spit of land is pretty distracting. I'm wondering if that's a slip on the line. I don't know what that is. Is that really critical to kind of understanding where Salem is on this map? The other thing that kind of pulled my attention was how jaggedy this was. So sometimes you can have too much detail for what you want to show. And then the last idea here, or the next to last idea, is that often maps will move city dots. So a city dot might mean the center of a city, or it could mean the edge of the city, but it might just mostly mean the city is near here, right? And because you could have a dot that's 1/4 of an inch in diameter or a millimeter in diameter on a map, and they could overlap, and then you wouldn't be able to see which city was which. So cartographers actually go in and move those dots. So they're no longer officially accurate, but does that hurt anything? I mean, are you getting close enough in your car? Do you need to know the exact lat long, to the 10th decimal? And then as we symbolize data, a city can be an area. It can also be like this. So here we have the city of Salem as a physical area on the map, but we also see it as a point, and that just depends on kind of how much detail you need in the map and what you're trying to show. So all of those things are ways that we generalize data on a map. And so here's kind of a summary of what we talked about with Aileen Buckley. When you look at your maps, I think the top 3 are the ones I really want you to think about. That organization of text and images, the balance, and legibility. And then can you see the difference between elements on the map? So I just wanted to show you some examples of what are considered pretty amazing maps. This is a map showing Napoleon's campaign in 1812. And the width of the graph shows how many troops went out, the end of the campaign, and then how many troops came back. And this is considered one of the most classic examples of just clear visualization, because you can look at this map and you can get that sense of the devastation of war and campaigns, that you had that many, people leaving to Russia and how many people coming back. It's just a classic map example. This is a map that was developed based on some color research by a woman named Cynthia Brewer. And she has a really sweet little website we'll look at later that helps people pick colors. But this was designed for people with color blindness. So she used a mix of 2 color schemes, and then hatching means that it's very sparse data. So age-adjusted death rate for this is liver disease for white males, and wow, that's not so good. Yeah. Wow, look here. So if you want to have less liver disease, this is where you need to live. I wonder what that's about.
Agricultural pesticides, I bet.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. I'm wondering about diet. Yeah, so then you'd want to kind of look at all what other social implications are happening. That's pretty, yeah, fascinating. Fascinating. Anyway, I like that map. And this is one done by Cynthia Brewer to look at percent Hispanic, and she does it in the upper right-hand corner, so she's got lots of pieces of information on here. She has Alaska, kind of where Alaska goes, Hawaii, a little closer to where Hawaii goes, and she's got it by state, and she has it here as percent of the population by county. And so these are considered really elegant, very nice examples of quality mapping. So, okay, so she's got 4 different scales, right? So here's the inset scale for Alaska, the inset for Hawaii, that's for the U.S., and then that's for Puerto Rico. So that's very cool. And I think this color bar with the line across really helps distinguish the high and low. That's a nice break. Cool.